Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Analytics Query. Today, we'll be talking all things Microsoft Purview, and we are joined by our special guest, Reiss McSporran. Welcome, Reiss.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you start by introducing yourself? Who are you, I guess, is the first.
Jarrett. Who am I? So I'm Reiss McSporran. I'm a lead consultant at Simpson Associates. I work within the public sector delivery team, dealing with all things from charities, public sector bodies, healthcare, and the rest.
So a wide range of different companies, clients, everything in between.
Very much so.
Very good. And so perfect position to talk about Microsoft Purview. Why don't you start by explaining what Microsoft Purview is and what you can do with it?
Yeah. So Purview itself is fundamentally a data governance tool. And that's where kind of we'll be focusing on today. I think that there's a bunch of different arms to Purview, and there's a lot that it can do. As it progresses, more and more things are being kind of added and grouped in along kind of the security and networking and all of those. But Purview itself, kind of the area that we're focusing on, is the data governance side. And so what that means in a nutshell is, where is your data? How do you manage it? And how do you access it? How do you secure it? How do you just manage a whole data estate? How does it, where does it sit and who owns it, and everything to do with it, really.
I guess so those are some of the kind of capabilities, but what are the benefits of making sure that that's accurate and correct and secure within your working environment?
Yeah, so you've got governance as a whole is something that's increasing in relevance over the past few years. We see companies being a lot more, having a lot more ownership over their data and wanting to know who has the relevant access and wanting to know how they can share data. A lot of companies have got into that world of more and more systems come online, more and more data comes online, and everything just grows and grows and grows. And then when you're trying to say, well, where does our personally identifiable information exist? Who has access to it? How do we have all of our correct security concerns? How do we manage all of those items, and how do we control it all and put someone in charge and make someone accountable for it? That's where kind of Purview centralizes all of that and allows you to make those steps into securing your organization and getting in control of the data that you hold.
I guess we definitely see that in various different customers' environments, that things keep growing, we get more and more data. How important is it to be proactive when it comes to these kind of management and Purview as a tool, rather than using it as a reactive kind of emergency? Oh, we've gone too far, let's panic.
Yeah, so you'd always want to err on the side of proactive rather than reactive. But the reason that you end up getting to this data governance piece and you get to the point of, we need a tool like Microsoft Purview, is usually because something's happened.
Yeah.
Whether that's a data breach or whether that's a security issue or whatever it is, it's very rarely going to be that you go, let's spend a load of money doing some data governance.
Well, it's the fun task that everyone wants to do.
Exactly. It's not the sexiest of tools that exist, but it's that piece that when you get the grasp of what it's doing and the benefits behind it, it becomes fundamental to the way that you manage your data, and that there's kind of three key elements to it. One's creating the data, one's using the data, but then the third logical piece is governing that data. And yeah, applying that security so that you can move from reactive to proactive is key to doing that, I think.
So I think we probably know the answer to this question, and it's probably everyone, but who needs data governance?
Yeah, you're right. Everyone, right? But it's a data governance strategy is different to the tool that's required to implement it. So depending on the size of the organization, the number of systems involved, and ultimately what your kind of risk tolerance and acceptability is, if you're a kind of much smaller organization with a smaller number of people, you're going to be able to manage your data estate and the data that sits within it in a lot more sensible way. When I say a sensible way, what I mean is a more simplistic manner, because there's going to be less people trying to access data. There's going to be less people onboarding and offboarding from the company. But as the company itself grows and teams start to diverge, and you potentially don't know half the people that work in your organization, the requests for data access, the offboarding of staff, who has what access to things, those kind of questions suddenly start to rear their head. And there needs to be a place to put that information and a place to manage that. And Purview is one of the options, but primarily the Microsoft option to assist with that.
So let's talk more about that Microsoft Purview. Why would you recommend using that as the tool? What are the benefits in Microsoft Purview?
So benefits of Microsoft Purview itself is you've got, if you've already got the Microsoft estate, right, it has all of the built-in tools that just start to align with it. So if you start to talk about security classification, so we're talking about like security levels on documents and things like that, it's automatically kind of built in that you can implement it and hook it up to your Microsoft Office estate. So it just kind of flows through, kind of go automatically, right? But it does just flow through once you've got that in place. And the kind of other key benefit outside of it just being a Microsoft tool in your Microsoft estate is it's everything in one place. So you've got your data assets in, so you've got the kind of connections to all of your data, but all of the data products in there as well, and then all the terminology, and then all of your OKRs, and everything kind of adds and piles on top, rather than necessarily having some of your information in one place being completely disconnected from others. It's a holistic tool that is constantly getting developed and added to, and becoming more and more useful as time goes on.
And if you're starting out on this data governance and you've got the Microsoft suite, how would you start looking at Microsoft Purview, or even just a data governance strategy? What would your first steps be?
So first steps on that is, you're right, you want to be looking at the strategy rather than the tools. You're trying to look at what your problem areas are and what you're trying to solve, and then you look to Microsoft Purview to see how it can solve those issues, rather than necessarily saying, this is Microsoft Purview, how can it solve our problems, what does it do? It's got to be more the other way around. You need to identify where your problems sit, and then the tool will help you fill those. So it may well be that you're looking at this and you say, we need to know where all of our different data connections are and who has access to them. We need to know what the different data products that we're building are, and again, who has access to them. We need to start putting in a path for people to request access onto systems that's, again, centralized. We need to start sharing business definitions around what does customer mean or what does product mean, and it will mean different things for different teams, but how can we centralize all of that? And it's working out those business problems and challenges that you've got, both proactively, but also potentially reactively, as we said, that it might be on the back of an issue that you've had. But the strategy and kind of your use case for the software wants to come first, and then Purview will help you to fill those goals. So if we're talking around kind of the nitty-gritty specifics, we're talking that you end up creating a picture of your data estate within Microsoft Purview, but not by just kind of drawing arrows and building boxes, but by setting up live connections. So connecting Purview to a data source, it can then read that data source to say what's in that data source. You can then classify all of those and put it into a department. You can then scan some Power BI files and say, this is a data product that comes off the back of it, and this product sits in this department or this team, and that goes under the business objects and that structure of the.
And so suddenly you're building up this picture that you can see all of your data, which comes from many different sources, goes to many different places, but there's that kind of overarching view.
Yes, the data map is ultimately what you end up with, and you can drill down into all the different sections and see where it goes. Whether that's database or data lake or anything ultimately, where the data's
kind of them together.
Yeah, and how they all fit together and feed together, and essentially everything that exists within Purview, once you've connected it up, has several links to other areas of the system. So when you're putting in a data product, you can then link that data product to other data products or glossary definitions or OKRs or all the other parts. So you start to not just build up the map of your estate as a visual that will automatically get created based upon what you add, but you also then get the context and the referenceability around that could then be used as a data dictionary for staff to look at, search, and start to consume data. As a kind of end user, you might say, I want to find out where I can get this kind of data, and you can query Purview as that front door to say, this is where you could get it, here is where you can request access, and kind of click this button to start that process.
And you've mentioned a couple already, but are there any other specific features of Purview that you found very useful when using it?
So I think the kind of key features it's kind of saying over the same bits again is really that the being able to classify and add context to your data products around what the purpose of them is, what they mean, and how they're built is really one of the key areas, because it's very easy to say to your staff, like your engineering team, or someone will build a Power BI model and throw a bunch of Power BI models for analysts to get access to. But if an analyst says, well, I want to get access to this kind of data, unless there's something stored somewhere or written down, or one of the engineers has written up a bunch of workflow, it's very difficult to find that information.
Because normally what you do is you message someone on Teams and it's the one person who knows every ounce of that data, and they'll be able to pick out the columns in the right table.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess this is making it into a more structured, accessible place rather than having to bother that one hive mind of the business.
Exactly that. And you democratize the responsibility for updating tool and updated Purview and keeping it intact to the relevant people and to the relevant teams that are in control of that data. So you apply an owner to those data products to the team that actually owns that data product, and it's up to them to keep it up to date within Purview so that it reduces their kind of inbound queries, right? If you've got, like you said, the team that has, how do I find, or where do I get, if they've spent the same time that they would answering the question, putting it into Purview, it kind of becomes more and more useful. And the more that it gets used and the more that it gets added to, the further the benefits extend.
And the benefits for someone new to the business or external people coming in, or even themselves and being able to get on with their job, I guess, spread quite far.
Yeah. And we've all had it, right? When you start a new role and acronyms on top of acronyms, right? What do they all mean? And when you've got like a business glossary that exists within there that you can just search for specific items, or you can just scroll through the list and you can say, right, OKR, let's touch on that in a moment, but what does OKR mean? Okay, OKR is objectives and key results. Okay, great. Well, what data products does that exist in? How can I see the live usage of that, or how can I see an example? Let's see what that business definition is linked to. Oh, okay, it's linked to these OKRs. Let's go and look at some, and let's go and see. Obviously, that's dependent upon, or maybe not obviously, but that is dependent upon the security access that you would have. So in that instance, you may not have access to OKRs specifically, or you may not have access to the data product specifically, but within the tool requesting access and giving you that path, it's fairly good at saying, you don't have whatever ADC access to this element, and here's an escalation path. So there's those paths through as well.
You mentioned OKRs. Do you want to talk a bit more into those?
Yeah. So OKRs, objectives and key results, right? So it's a way that you can kind of measure your business based upon specific metrics. And you have an objective, which is your kind of business statement that you're trying to achieve. And then you've got results that sit underneath on key measurable items that are what you're going to track that progress against. So it may be improve the uptake of Microsoft Purview, might be one of your items. And you say one of those key results on there may be the number of people that have been given access. We have a goal that we want to give 50 people access and training to it. How are we passing along there? We want to check who's been using that access. We want to reduce the help desk calls that we're getting around usability of Power BI. Those are kind of the results you'd stick underneath. And then you can track how those change over time through the inbuilt reporting within Purview. And you can also link those results to the different areas of Purview that they're relevant to. They don't auto-update in terms of those because a lot of them are generally kind of contextual. There'd be no way to update Purview automatically to say how many people have been trained.
Yeah.
But it does have the history of what the previous values were, and it has the information of linking to relevant data sets. And it's not necessarily just for kind of the uptake of Purview. It could very well be more actual business metric definitions. So finance, we want to increase profitability by X%. And then there's a link in that result that goes to the Power BI that you can see what the current live view is.
And it's just putting all of those things into one place, and then they can be sent out to wherever is the relevant place. But for those start, you can list and look at all of them together.
Yeah, and anyone that's kind of seriously using kind of OKRs for the business already probably has their own OKR management tool that they sit within. And Purview is potentially a way that you could use it instead. But it's kind of more about giving you the link to where you can get the answers to those OKRs rather than having a slide deck with a bunch of OKRs. And now I need to go and find all of the answers for my board reporting every month. It's, if they're all in Purview, here's all the items. I can just click through, have a look at what those numbers are, ask those relevant questions, and it gives you that roadmap and it gives you that path to find the information you're looking for.
And we've spoken a lot about what Purview does, how it fits within the business. Do you have any tips to get started if you've built that strategy, if you've got what you want from it, but actually you've never opened Purview before? Where would you start?
So there used to be a kind of a large entry point that used to be as soon as you kind of click the button and start using Purview, there was a sudden large cost incurred. And when you've got kind of your free credits and things that you get with your Azure accounts, and those would just get eaten up straight away. But the cost model for that has changed into the data products and how it's being used rather than necessarily what's scanned and created. So it's become a lot more easy to get started and to have a look around and have a browse. And ultimately, the kind of most sensible thing to do is to just have a look. Click on the button, and there's a bunch of, like in Azure, click on the button to open Purview, take a look at the documentation that sits in there. There's a bunch of walkthroughs on every section. It's very well put together in terms of if you click onto the data governance tab, it will come up with a little window with a bunch of like 8 different steps that you can click through to have a look. The Microsoft Learn articles are very comprehensive around how the system works and what's going on. Those are constantly being updated as new features come in. As with any cloud software, I think the changes that go into the software
definitely
are very frequent. And I think every one of these kind of Purview implementations that we do, by the time we get to the end of the implementation, there's a bunch of new features that weren't there when we started. So it's rapidly moving, but yeah, it's click on the button, have a look,
Yeah.
and when you get stuck, give us a ring. That's kind of what it is, right? That's how we get into a lot of the kind of implementations that we get into, is very much that customers have had a look at it themselves. They can see the business benefit, but they just want some best practice. They want some guidance. They want some framework that they can put into place. And as with kind of any of these tools, it's very easy to just do everything and again build yourself another big mess that's difficult to manage. But if you do things in the right way at the start and you kind of structure things properly and you spend the time planning your implementation, then it'll be a lot more of a success.
You mentioned the costs, especially if you're doing that and just mucking around, the cost can build up quickly. But am I right that there's a free version currently or a trial period currently available for Purview?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different options. There's one embedded within Fabric, which is I don't want to call it kind of Purview Lite, but there's that kind of, it has some elements of data governance, but it's not the full blown Purview estate. And then there's the kind of Purview that you can access directly through the Azure portal, which gives you a bunch more information. But I'd say take a look at what's available. It's quite difficult to just say, yes, it's free or no, it's not. But it should be very clear when you're looking through when you're going to start to be charged. And it's generally after you've scanned some items, because when you're, as I said, when you kind of connect up to systems, you do a scan of that data for it to go and read everything and bring it back in. And when you've done that scan and then started building out some data products to say this is a data product, that's when the charge starts to come in. So it is after you've kind of started and once you've progressed that you start getting charged, rather than necessarily as soon as you click the button.
And are there any common pitfalls or difficulties that you've seen people have that you'd want to kind of warn people about this time?
Yeah, so I think that if we were having this discussion kind of a couple of months ago, it very much would have been, be careful what you click, because the costs can spiral rapidly. But now it's probably be careful what you scan and be careful what you start to categorize, because that's when then the costs will start to pile up. But they shouldn't be kind of prohibitive to exploring the software. And if you start small and with a relevant plan, you should be able to manage those kind of costs. But it's ultimately, it's the same as kind of any of these software things. If you don't start with a good plan for what you're trying to achieve, and you're just kind of clicking buttons and creating things and giving loads of people access, you're not doing governance, and you're not actually securing things. If you've got a plan in place for what you're looking to do, and then you're using the tool to help you fulfill the plan, you shouldn't really have any major issues, I don't think.
Well, thank you very much, Reiss, for your wisdom and insight. Appreciate you coming on the show. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.